A lot of people want to know if they can fast on GLP-1s, and I often think it's irresponsible not to.
Welcome back to another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. I'm Coach Terri Lance, and I'm joined today by Megan Ramos. Before we get started, I want to let you know that Megan's Intermittent Fasting Masterclass starts on August 31st. It's a 4-week course designed to help you understand not just how to fast, but why different fasting strategies work, how they fit together, and what to adjust when things aren't working as expected. It includes 14 recorded lessons, 4 live Q&A sessions with Megan, concise lesson summaries, and 1 month of access to the Fasting Method community for non-members. That actually fits really well with today's conversation because we hear so many questions from people who aren't sure whether fasting is right for them. Can women fast? What if you're under a lot of stress? What if you're already fairly lean and you're concerned about muscle loss, or you're taking a GLP-1? Megan and I dig into those questions today and why the answers are often more nuanced than a simple yes or no. So if this episode helps you realize that fasting may be an option for you and you want a stronger foundation for knowing how to apply it, the Masterclass is a natural next step. You'll find all the details in the show notes. Now, let's get into the conversation. Megan, how are you doing?
Hey, Terri, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there. Busy time of year. Speaking of a busy time of year, it's one of the reasons you and I are here today is to talk about this time of year for many people brings some thoughts around what am I going to be working on? Some people might be new to us, new to listening to us, or new to this whole idea of doing fasting. And so we're going to talk some today about intermittent fasting. Who is it for? What is it for? Just to frame it up for people as they are heading into this next season of the year. Where would you like us to start with that?
Fasting's really gained a ton of popularity over the years. And when something gains a lot of popularity, then everybody wants to chime in and have a say on it. And suddenly everybody's an expert on it, whether they've done fasting themselves or not, or have helped people or not. There's opinions left, right, and center. And it's often really confusing for a lot of people. Can I do fasting? This person says, no, I shouldn't. This person says, oh, yes, I can. Or my healthcare provider said, oh no, like women shouldn't fast. But my best friend going through perimenopause just lost 30 pounds. And so I'm just really confused. So there's a handful of these themes that we keep seeing come up. And a lot of questions that come into our fasting method inbox. This is my story. Is it suitable for me to fast? They fall into 5 different categories. One of them is women and fasting, like throughout the entire lifespan, adult lifespan of a woman. There's concerns and questions about appropriateness. Individuals who are slender or skinny to the eye, but have metabolic syndrome and aren't quite sure they can treat that metabolic syndrome with fasting and would like to, but they don't weigh very much. And then stress. You hear all of the time, fasting, you should fast if you're stressed, and fasting raises cortisol and this and that. But it's not so black and white. And then fasting is going to break down your muscle mass. Or if you're actively trying to gain muscle mass or reverse a condition like osteoporosis, so improving lean mass, like bone mass, you shouldn't fast. And there's just a ton of questions coming out about fasting on GLP-1s. So find that we often are getting questions in these 5 buckets. And my answer is usually that if you're a healthier individual, I mean, you might be on blood pressure medication or diabetic medication, but overall, if you're combating metabolic syndrome or inflammatory conditions, but are otherwise able to work, you're not on like full disability, for example, or you're able to sort of keep up with your activities, even if you're feeling run down. Generally, you can fast. Now, of course, you always have to get permission from your healthcare team. Your doctor, your healthcare provider has to give you medical clearance to fast. But in general, most people can. So I thought in today's episode, since we're getting to that time of the year, like you said, Terry, a lot of people are feeling frustrated about the summer, know that the holidays are quickly approaching, and just want to get control of their health. And people don't just want to lose weight anymore. They want to optimize their health, their lifespan. People work really hard for a long time. They want to enjoy their life, and especially as they get into retirement years. Yeah, so I thought maybe we could talk about 5 buckets or categories that we see comes into our email box.
I love it. And I think it's also really relevant to other people who have been fasting for a while, but need some kind of reminders of some of the purposes and thoughts around that. So let's maybe start with the whole bucket of women and fasting. And again, as you said, some people are like, yeah, it's great, but it's not really good for women, or it's not good for women during this stage of their lives. So where do you go with the topic of women and fasting since you wrote a book on it, Megan?
Well, I think one of the most important things that women of any age should know is that medical research really isn't done on us because we have these significant hormonal changes that occur. For cycling women, significant hormonal changes occur over the span of a month. Throw in conditions like PMOS or endometriosis and things like that, they get even more irregular and unpredictable. Then we go through perimenopause, menopause. I mean, that's a whole decade-long ordeal. No one does research on us. So one of the biggest reasons why you hear a lot of quote unquote experts say women shouldn't fast is because the research isn't there. But anecdotally, women had to have fasted for a significant amount of human history. We didn't have cave person cupboards and cave person refrigerators. And yes, we did learn about food preservation as a species, but that's even more relatively recent in human history. We have fasted. So I feel like that is quite a lot of evidence. Every major religion in the world has incorporated fasting in it. It's just been modified by modern lifestyle over time. So if you think of something like Lent, for example, now it's like 40 days without beer or without pizza, but it used to be 40 days of fasting. So women have fasted. We hear every age group. If you're menstruating, it's too much stress. It will make your cycles irregular. Nowadays, I sort of joke with some female hormonal experts, like you have PCOS or PMOS until proven otherwise nowadays, because it's so prevalent amongst women. I was diagnosed at 14, being born in 1984, and I just look at a lot of my mom friends, they all struggled with infertility and they're all 10 years younger than me. And they all were diagnosed with PMOS at some point later in their lives. A lot of women just don't want any more irregularities, but we fasted a ton of women. So whether fertility is your goal or not, if you're a cycling woman who's struggling with hormonal imbalances, a lot of experts try to fix those hormonal imbalances, like the sex hormonal imbalances first. But the insulin's actually driving the sex hormone imbalances. So I just feel like these women never get off the hamster wheel. And then they often end up showing up at our door infinitely frustrated, having gone off the deep end with their diet after being so strict and trying to follow all these things and 1,800 supplements and just making things worse. And we fast, we treat the insulin issue, and then we can work on the sex hormone issue. And then voila, a few months later, they're starting to have regular cycles. So yes, fasting in the short term can cause some hormonal irregularities because we're fixing the insulin, but your hormones are already irregular to start with. So, your cycle might be even more off for a couple of months, but usually we see things go from abnormal to normal in the span of about 3 to 4 months, and definitely by 6 months. And for women who are seeking fertility, we often have a lot of women that we work with who get pregnant around that 6 month marker. So will your cycles get worse before they get better? Yeah, maybe for a couple of months. But the bottom line is they will get better because you're treating the root cause of the condition. Whether fertility or not is in a cycling woman's interest. It's still the same thing. We want to fix the sex hormones if we want to lose weight and fix the insulin resistance. We've got to tackle the insulin, and fasting is a powerful way to do so. I've had lots of success. I've personally had a lot of success with this. I'm a 42-year-old mom of two. After being told at 14 I was never going to have kids. There's a lot of hope when you have PMOS that you can reverse it. And then we go to the perimenopause. But again, I think fasting is one of the best things to start during perimenopause because it's the time you're most likely to develop insulin resistance if you don't already have it. And how you get through menopause largely is going to depend upon your level of insulin resistance. Women who don't have insulin resistance go through perimenopause and menopause a lot more gracefully than women who have some degree of it, especially quite a lot of insulin resistance. Fasting is a great tool, again, to help tackle that insulin resistance because it can cause such dysregulation to sex hormones, even as you're going through these hormonal shifts. So, even though our body's slowing down production of some of these prominent sex hormones like estradiol and progesterone, doesn't mean that they can't be haywire during the slowdown period. And often the discrepancy with progesterone going down so much faster than estradiol levels and estradiol levels dropping, we're so much more prone to developing diabetes. It just seems like a really intelligent thing to do to be preventative and to have a better hormonal journey. A lot of women, though, during this time are trying to lose some weight. And I hear you. I've just had two pregnancies, my late 30s and early 40s, and I have weight loss goals. I didn't gain much weight during either pregnancy, but I still have weight loss goals. Don't feel like myself. And it's definitely not easier in my 40s than it was in my 30s, even with fasting. So, weight loss during these big hormonal shifts that occur throughout perimenopause and menopause, they're difficult, but they're not impossible. And sometimes they require a little bit more of a balance between fasting and nutrition. Maybe it does require you having breakfast on more of a regular basis if you're experiencing some thyroid abnormalities or stress, but it is possible. So I haven't been through this journey yet, but I've helped a lot of women succeed through it. And it can be slower to reach weight loss goals, but it is really rewarding in the big picture.
I think, Megan, both from my experience as a coach and as my experience as a woman, maybe I was a little lucky when I first started this journey that I didn't know as much about fasting as so many people do coming to us. But I had never heard that I shouldn't fast as a woman, and I joined you when I was perimenopausal, and now postmenopausal. And fasting has always been a part of that during those years and a productive part of navigating my hormonal journey. And again, with so many clients, I have clients from premenopausal all the way to age 83. Sometimes we have to strategize differently, but never once has it prevented any of my clients from being able to fast and produce some helpful, supportive things for their health journey and their weight loss journey. So definitely wish we could just totally debunk that old myth that women shouldn't fast. I think the next bucket that you had originally mentioned, Megan, is people who maybe are thin on the outside and yet struggling metabolically. Where do they fit here?
We call them TOFIs. So to look at them, you think that they have to be pretty healthy because they're slender, but they have something like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and or type 2 diabetes. And when we look at these individuals, we call them that, TOFIs, thin on the outside and fat on the inside. And what does that mean? These individuals have a lot of visceral fat and not very much subcutaneous fat. Now, subcutaneous fat is the fat that lies between top of your skin layer and your abdominal cavity. It's what we see in our bellies and our hips and thighs when we're assessing, how am I going to feel on the beach today during a holiday? And these people have very little of that. So that's why we just assume that they don't have disease. But visceral fat is fat that surrounds our organs and infiltrates our organs. So we don't see it to the naked eye, but it causes a tremendous amount of disease. It muffles communication signals and the organ's ability to function. So we see a lot, again, fatty liver is visceral fat. We see a lot of fatty pancreases. For example, it's common for a very slender individual to have type 2 diabetes. And they might not weigh very much, but someone could weigh, say, 150 pounds. And they could be 24% body fat and have great bone mass, no concerns about osteoporosis, and great muscle mass, and they're not losing any muscle mass. And that's amazing. But someone can weigh 150 pounds and have brittle bones and have sarcopenia, which is muscle wasting, and just be all body fat and visceral fat, even though they don't weigh very much to begin with. So body composition really matters. A lot of the times we'll get these emails, I weigh this, I wear this dress size or this pant size, I have type 2 diabetes, and I'd like to fast. Like, I don't know how to make it better, but I'm afraid I'm going to waste away. So these individuals, we focus a lot on body recomposition. So we do therapeutic fasting, and they're completely suitable candidates to do so. But we work a lot more on nutrition to support the healthy mass that they do have and to help them gain healthy mass. And something we'll talk about in a bit is how fasting can cause us to secrete youthful levels of human growth hormone, which improves our ability and helps us out greatly in gaining lean mass. So building stronger bones and stronger muscles. So fasting is a great way to help with body recomposition if done properly. A lot of these individuals, you can fast. I remember once in the clinic, shortly after we started, there was this woman. She was very petite. She's like in 90 pounds, maybe 4'10" at most, with type 2 diabetes. And Dr. Fong said, "You're tofu, thin on the outside, but fat on the inside." And the goal was not to make her 50 pounds. That was not the goal. The goal was to fix her osteoporosis, to fix her sarcopenia, and to get rid of the visceral fat that was causing disease. And we did that through fasting.
And as you said, in a way that doesn't lead to rapid weight loss that she's not seeking, but instead to help her build a strong, vibrant body with healthy metabolic functioning.
I think they all kind of tie in together from here on out. The buckets, a lot of them have to do with hormones, these counter-regulatory hormones. So maybe before we dive into the last three buckets, I can talk about this briefly. What separates fasting from a low-calorie experience is that fasting actually has a stress response on the body. But the stress response is called hormesis, and hormesis means a positive stressor that results in resilience. So for those of you who've ever worked out in the gym, you know, if you lift a 1 pound dumbbell, you're probably not going to gain a whole lot of muscle mass. If it's your first time walking into the gym in years, if you lift a 100 pound dumbbell and you try to do that repeatedly, you could hurt yourself. But 10 pounds might feel a little bit heavy, but you're not hurting yourself. So it's exerting some stress, but not too much stress. You're not going to end up having to go to physical therapy or see your chiropractor afterwards, but your muscles are going to feel a little bit sore. And when we leave the gym, we know that that little bit of soreness is a good thing because it means that we're helping our muscles grow. And that type of stress is a positive hormesis experience. And that's what fasting is. So we do activate our sympathetic nervous system when we start to fast. And we produce these counter-regulatory hormones, which are really sort of the magic of fasting, and separate fasting from low-calorie diets. These counter-regulatory hormones, one of them is noradrenaline, which helps our body burn body fat for fuel, but it also, as a result, helps us maintain our resting metabolic rate. Whereas when you do calorie restriction diets, everything just kind of slows down to match your caloric intake. We do produce a bit of cortisol, which we'll talk about fasting and stress in a minute, but this little bit of cortisol, it's not a significant amount. Again, it's a little bit of cortisol, and it just enables the body to convert some free-floating amino acids into glucose for parts of the brain that do need it during a fast. And then the other really big ticket one from fasting is this human growth hormone production. It's something we produce a lot of in our adolescence, but not so much as we've reached our desired height and adult shape and form. It really starts to slow down. And generally, that's a good thing because growth in adults, we really don't like growth in adults. But to have some intermittent injections, naturally occurring injections of human growth hormone from fasting can help be protective and preventative for individuals rather than having sort of constant growth happening all of the time, like in our adolescence. A little bit is good for us in adulthood, and fasting can generate that, whereas not having any of it can lead us to be susceptible. So those counter-regulatory hormones, again, they're sort of what makes fasting special, but then they do lead to some confusion or help dispel some myths when it comes to fasting.
So, Megan, it sounds like those counter-regulatory hormones, as you said, kind of bring together these next three buckets that you mentioned in the beginning. Let's move there next.
One of the biggest ones, I think, is stress. Stress is this constant theme. If you're a man and experiencing stress, you shouldn't fast. If you're a woman and experiencing stress, you shouldn't fast. If you're a woman and have hormonal changes, the hormonal changes are stressful, do not fast, or the hormonal changes are going to get worse from the stress. It's not super straightforward. There's a few things that need to be evaluated first. One thing we need to acknowledge is that stress is a continuum. It can be a little bit of stress, or it can be a whole hell of a lot of stress, or somewhere in between. And we all have some type of stressors somewhere in between. My son didn't fall asleep today for his nap until 3:45. That's not going to be fun for us this evening. It's going to be a stressor. It's not a life-altering stressor. It's just going to result in me wanting to have some caffeine this evening when I shouldn't, type of stressor. So stress falls on a continuum from light stress to life-altering stress. Another thing when someone comes to me and says, I'm stressed, can I fast? Is it acute versus chronic stress? And definitely, if it's a really heavy, chaotic time, we don't want to introduce anything new in the moment. But if it's more something ongoing or something we've had some adaptability to, then we can fast. Another thing, too, to take into consideration is it physically impacting you? What does that mean? Are you experiencing total adrenal burnout? I've shared on previous podcasts, in 2019, I didn't know that I would make it. I couldn't get my blood pressure out of the 80/40 range. Like if my systolic would even hit 80, that was good because it was often sitting in the high 70s. I felt pretty awful and I couldn't even stand up to pour a glass of water. That's a lot of stress. And my body was under a tremendous amount of physiological stress. It was not a time for fasting at all. So we have to sort of assess where you are. And again, this whole impacting you physically can be on a continuum too, where it's just minor. Maybe you're having some sleep disturbances, but otherwise functioning. Or maybe you're like me and couldn't pour water for a while and needed to heal in other ways before you could start to do some therapeutic fasting again. And often I'd say all of these things, there's a bit of the continuum where you could fall. And yes, there is a small number of individuals who are experiencing stress who can't fast, but most people can. And there are often great ways to modify it, to minimize the impact of it on the body, minimize any additional cortisol production and whatnot. So a really simple one is like fasting from breakfast to breakfast for 24s. So there's a lot that we can do there. So that's sort of where the cortisol aspect jumps in, and we have to see how full is your cup of cortisol already? Will a drop of it cause it to overflow? Or will a drop of it really not make much of a difference as it's at a more moderate level?
I think another piece to add there for some people is navigating very stressful events and experiences in our lives. If we're really kind of off track with our food and our eating behaviors, brain fog makes it even harder to deal with stress. And so being able to get in, like you said, even some 24s, if the stressor allows for that, eases up some on the brain fog, which actually helps us navigate the stress better than trying to get through it totally bogged down with those symptoms of problematic foods and things.
To tack on to these counter-regulatory hormones, one of the other things that we hear about, not cortisol, but is about sort of muscle wasting and this and that, and you're going to waste away. And there's a lot of people who are now more aware about wellness and understand that as we age, they lose muscle mass. So you're afraid to fast because you're afraid of losing muscle mass, or maybe you've been diagnosed with osteoporosis or osteopenia, which is like pre-osteoporosis. And this is where we go back to that human growth hormone, counter-regulatory hormone being really protective. So when you're in a fasted state, yes, it's a catabolic state. You're breaking down, but you produce this human growth hormone. And then you re-enter the feeding cycle where you've got protein and amino acids and a healthy small amount of insulin, and that helps you grow and maintain your mass. We've done therapeutic fasting with athletes with very little to almost no body fat and been able to maintain their body composition. There are celebrities like Hugh Jackman who famously talk about fasting for 24 hours regularly to help put on lean mass so he can utilize this human growth hormone spikes that occur during a fast. The first one, usually for most individuals, is around 19 hours fasted. So you would do 24-hour fasts just to help get this human growth hormone, then work out, and then refeed to make it sort of the perfect combination for gaining lean mass. So you don't have to worry about losing mass. Fasting is actually pretty protective and it can actually help you gain lean mass. So it's a great way to help your body stay stronger as it ages. It doesn't break you down like so many people think. And a big part of that is due to the counter-regulatory hormones and all of the literature. And there is a lot, again, mostly done in men, that compares true fasting to calorie restriction. We all see preservation or even growth of lean mass with fasting, where we always see a clinically significant reduction in lean mass in the calorie restriction group. And that's due to this counter-regulatory hormone, human growth hormone, that fasting causes the body to produce.
And I think that also ties then in directly with your fifth bucket.
Yeah, the GLP-1s. A lot of people want to know if they can fast on GLP-1s, and I often think it's irresponsible not to. GLP-1s are not new, and Terri, you and I have talked about this on the podcast before. I mean, 20 years ago, people were prescribing Saxenda, Victoza regularly in the clinic for blood sugar regulation. We've just gotten more and they gained in popularity, and now some of them are targeted specifically for weight loss, which is new because they used to just be mostly targeted for diabetes, with weight loss being a very pleasant side effect for many. But you have to remember weight loss. We want fat loss. We don't want muscle loss or bone loss. And we do know there's tons of data that goes to show that GLP-1s can really cause the breakdown of muscle mass. So fasting is a great insurance policy. Get that human growth hormone going, baby. Like protect that lean mass, help your body generate it. You can put on lean mass if you're on a GLP-1 when you're fasting and you doing proper physical activity. So it doesn't need to be a negative thing. Now, of course, if you're taking a GLP-1 for weight loss, always want people to get curious about maybe why their body's not producing enough GLP-1 on its own. That's a peptide that your body's fully capable of producing. And even then, if you figure out why and you're working on it, you still might want to take the medication to help you in the interim. All of that's fair. We are very supportive of what people choose to do around this medication when it comes to weight loss. And it's also a really great diabetic agent too. When you do need a medication in the interim as you're healing your insulin resistance. But I think it's very smart to fast when you're on it for that human growth hormone to help protect your lean mass, because we do know that it will target your lean mass. So that's something to be mindful of. And then prioritizing protein is one of the best ways to produce your own natural GLP-1 and also to help protect your muscle mass. So if you're taking a dosage of GLP-1s, that really eliminates your appetite altogether. I do think it's worthwhile to talk to your practitioner about maybe lowering that dosage so you can experience some appetite. Some appetite is good. And you can eat the steak, or you can eat the fish, or you can eat the protein sources, the eggs and whatnot. That will help you protect your lean mass while still providing other benefits from being on the medication as well. And again, fasting is a great tool because it will help you use the protein that you eat to really protect yourself against known side effects of the medication.
So, Megan, with all of this information that you've been sharing about folks who maybe thought that intermittent fasting wasn't going to be an option for them or wasn't a viable thing for them, you have a masterclass coming up that starts pretty soon here. So wondered if you could share some information about that.
Yeah, I have an intermittent fasting masterclass that's starting for people who are either brand new to fasting or have been fasting for a while but feel like they're trapped on the hamster wheel and just aren't getting anywhere. The intention is really to teach you the fasting method of fasting. We are the fasting method because we have a method. And it works. And a lot of people are kind of piecing together what so and so said in a Facebook group or what worked for their friend, or, we're all different. We have to figure out how to navigate this for ourselves. So, yes, there are general guidelines, but throughout the masterclass, we teach you how to apply it to you in your own journey to help provide some personalization and customization to it all. But we teach you like what fasting truly is by the fasting method's definition, what you can and can't have during the fast, how to eat on your eating days, how to handle social events and whatnot. So it's a month-long course. There's 14 lessons. There's live Q&As. Our Q&As are just that. They're Q&As. We're not giving any presentations. It's your chance to talk in the Q&As and ask your questions based on the video lessons that you've seen that week. So I think it's a great opportunity. And in addition to that masterclass, you get full access to our fasting method community where you can dive into some of our group meetings, webinars, and really get support and some guidance from the rest of our team. So it's a great place to either get started with your fasting journey or refine your fasting journey if you haven't been getting the results that you want. You don't have to be brand new to fasting, but you have to be open-minded about doing it the fasting method style.
One of the things I always love about when you have a program like this, Megan, is that as many times as I have heard you speak, every time I listen to something, I'm reminded of something valuable that I haven't been focusing on or could use to help support me and other people even more. So even people who feel like they have a pretty good handle on fasting, I guarantee there's a lot in doing a master class with you that will be new to them or reinforcing of things that maybe they've been kind of overlooking. So I think it's a great place, like you said, if you're just beginning or if you have quite a bit of experience but need to dig into another level. I think your programs always provide that.
It's a good opportunity to get started with fasting. So if you've thought fasting isn't suitable for you, or you think that it might be a great tool to have in your toolbox, it's a good place to get started. And we look forward to helping you with your journey and wrapping up this year strong.
I also want to encourage anyone that someone else in your life who is wondering about fasting, and if it's a fit for them, share this episode with them and help them understand that there are reasons why it fits for people who may have thought this wasn't the right time for them.
Well, thanks, Terri. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Happy fasting.
Take good care, everyone.